Deeply Tippy by Right Said Fred on the Richie Allen Radio Show, 16 minutes past 6, Tuesday's show. Let's get into it. The Freds, Right Said Fred, massive, huge, 30 million record sales at least. They've played with and for Prince and Madonna and David Bowie. Hundreds of millions of plays on Spotify, still hugely in demand today. Why wouldn't they be? Festivals, of course, Pride, just huge. Lovely to be chatting with them. They popped around Trafalgar Square on Saturday. They were photographed there, and the tabloid media got into it with them, and they were trolled and plagued on Twitter by people making all sorts of allegations about them. I don't think they care too much about that. Let's welcome to the programme Fred and Richard Fairbrass, Right Said Fred. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. Welcome back, Fred. And how you doing, Richard? Nice to be chatting with you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
It's a real pleasure, lad. Thanks for doing it today. That was a big, brilliant stuff. That was a big storm, that wasn't it, over the weekend? What the hell was going on? So why did you pop? Why did you go anyway? What were you there for on Saturday?
Cream.
Well, yeah, we just thought we're curious, because there's something not right about what's going on. The response from the government is disproportionate. The way the Coronavirus Act of 2020, which is what I think is being they're going through it again tomorrow. I think the draconian approach. We just thought something didn't feel right. But that march was on. We thought we'd go and have a look. The trouble is, you go and people don't say, "Oh, that's interesting. Why were you there?" The question you've just asked, nobody asked. No. All they said is, "You shouldn't go. You must be a QAnon. You must think the Queen is eating children, and that's why you're there." I mean, people just don't bother to ask; they just want to assume. It'd be like same as Piers Morgan did. He just did his usual clickbait journalism,
Well, I think in the Mail it was described as a COVID-19 denial march. Yeah, and that's not what it was. That's not what it was. And one of the major problems, I think, of this whole affair is the appalling and abysmal reporting that's gone on in the mainstream media. You get one or two journalists whose eyes are open, I think. And interestingly, you get some interesting journalists in the Telegraph, which you wouldn't normally assume to be the home of that kind of stuff. And you get Anna Breeze, and Julia Hartnett-Brewer and people like that, Mike Graham. But the overall image is one of just towing the government line. You very rarely get context when you're given figures. And I agree with Toby Young. It's 24/7 death porn, and it's very, very depressing.
The reaction, I suppose, the reporting of you being there by the media should give people a bit of a clue that something isn't right. I mean, it's crazy. Who's doing the Twitter account for the Freds? Because the response is hilarious to a lot of the trolls. It's really funny stuff.
Yeah, that's me. I got slagged off because I blocked people, but my view is it's just social media. It's not real life, man. Yeah. It's just like, if you're going to call me the C word, then the chances are I'm not going to be over the moon about that, and so I'm going to block you. That's just it. And I think the Independent today said we just blocked people, and that was our response. Well, that's not. That wasn't true either. I just got tired of being insulted, so I started blocking people. Then I got bored with that, and to be honest with you, I don't take it very seriously. It's just, I think a lot of the accounts are fake, and a lot of people just at home angry at us yesterday and tomorrow, and today they'll be angry at somebody else.
It's a little bit like, we've said this before. It's a little bit like if you told people that phoning in their votes on Celebrities Britain's Got Talent was not necessarily an indication of the winner, that the winner was already decided. If you made that accusation, some people would be furious, not because it's not true necessarily, but because it would make them look stupid for making that call.
Yeah.
And this is what this is like. It's the people who are vehemently pro-mask are not. They feel that they are being labelled as stupid by people who don't wear masks. My only problem with masks is just know why you're doing it. Know what mask works, know how you fit it, know how often it needs replacing, and know why you're doing it. Don't just do it because the idiot Matt Hancock has got up on TV and told you to. And also don't. It's not like pollen. You don't need to wear it in the street. So there's some fundamental stuff. I'm just really keen on people working stuff out for themselves.
Think for themselves. You guys must have been gigging in Paris, I don't know how many times over the course of your career. It's crazy there. I know Fred listens to this program occasionally. I don't know about you, Richard, but I do. My other half is French, and one of her best mates is working in Paris. You've got to wear the bloody things on the streets there now. What's happened to the French?
Oh dear, I know. And it's just, and what's weird is that I think it was Peru I was reading about, which have had some very harsh lockdowns, mandatory masks everywhere, and their numbers are appalling. So none of this is adding up. That's the only reason we ask questions, and the only reason we went to the march, and I go on, read different stuff, I know, by Carl Hennigan or Tom Jefferson or the lady up in Oxford, Robert Kennedy, and then Sunetra Gupta, I think her name is.
Yeah.
And I read people because they don't seem to be towing the line, and they seem to be talking outside the narrative. And I don't know if they're right or wrong, but at least it's another option as opposed to the endless. I mean, when I hear Matt Hancock's voice, I feel like self-harm.
Don't you kill your granny now.
He needs. I mean, I'd like to beat him with Priti Patel. I'd like to use her as a weapon.
That's the Daily Mail headline right there. You've just done us all a great favour. That'll be in the Mail tomorrow. Fred Fairbrass says he'd like to beat Matt Hancock with Priti Patel. You heard it here exclusively.
That's all they're good for, these people. And I just when I was watching Matt Hancock, I think he was talking to Julia Hartley-Brewer, I think, and they were talking about false positives, and he clearly had his little bit, his little soundbite rehearsed, and the minute they went outside that, he was lost.
Gone.
Yeah, gone. Yeah, the level of skill of politicians in this country is, well, not just this country, everywhere. It's just painful.
I've been given about 7,000 questions. You guys are incredibly humble. I remember when Fred was on. You're very humble. I mean, you are massive. And of all the massive, I mean, because I worked in commercial radio for many years, and I met people that have had success like you guys. And to be fair, most of them were pretty decent, but never as humble as you guys. You're just massive. And I want to talk in a minute about how this is affecting entertainment and music and culture. But before that, you've always been loved by students and universities, always. What about this guy, Gavin Williamson, the education secretary, saying today to students, oh, it's okay, we'll let you go home at Christmas. Are we asleep? Are we dreaming this, or is it really happening?
Well, it's that with abusers, they wrap up their abuse in this fake love, don't they?
Yeah.
It's care sold as aggression, or is it aggression sold as care? Sorry, other way around. Yeah, aggression sold as care, and that's what this is. They take something away and they give it back to you as if it's a favour. You know, it's insane, and the very idea you're going to stop a student going home at Christmas. This is, and now I don't know if you saw it today. I don't know how true it is because it was on Sky, so who knows? But it was about you mustn't sing or dance in a pub. it's like frigging Korea. What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
I think people have got very, very, very lazy, I think, and very dismissive of the rights and liberties which people before us fought very hard to achieve. And it makes me very cross when people are so laissez-faire about stuff that other people have laid down their lives to get. So, you know, the right to assemble, the right to free speech, the right to privacy, all these things are hard won. And we should be, and anybody who dismisses those things and doesn't really care about them should be ashamed of themselves, I think. I think it's really, really, really bad. I mean, I know it's a small example, but our father was in the Merchant Navy during the war on a minesweeper in the North Atlantic. Now, if he came back now, he had his arse hanging over the edge of this boat in the freezing water, right? And he came back, and then somebody said to him, "Yeah, that's all very well, mate, but you can't smoke in your own pub."
Imagine.
That's all very well, mate, but there's two little pictures on the floor there of feet. Can you stand there when you get your money out? You know, we're being infantilized by people who think we are stupid.
You were there now, both of you, on Saturday, and you may or may not know, I'm asking you just out of curiosity, friends of mine said that they felt a little bit hard done by by the police approach. I've had some emails from people who've been very critical of the police, and I've had some emails from people that have been a bit more moderate. But the general gist of what I've been sent is that the protesters were absolutely committed to being peaceful, standing there, sitting down and listening, and that the police were heavy-handed. I don't want to get you into trouble at all, but did you see any of that?
No, what we did, the coppers we saw, everybody was really friendly. And when I put the tweet up, I said, a nice vibe at Trafalgar Square. That's what I meant. The people were just friendly. I wasn't advocating any one thing. And we saw, because we didn't go right into the melee. We were just like orbiting and chatting with people. And then we saw the TSG vans, all the territorial support group vans. We saw them starting to rock up, and we thought, this does not feel right at all. And so we started to back away, and literally, as we were leaving, 10 minutes maybe as we would walk, after we decided to leave, we saw the coppers arriving. And then we didn't physically see it ourselves. We weren't there and witness it. We just saw stuff from iPhone footage. And I do know about half a dozen people who were there who are not bullshitters, and they just said it was horrible.
The weird thing is I went to the demo on the 29th of August, which was slightly smaller in Trafalgar Square, and it was slightly smaller. And the coppers then were absolutely fine. They were friendly and relaxed, and they let the thing just go. They didn't intervene. They didn't issue instructions for the purpose of watching those instructions being rejected, and then which then provides them with the excuse to go in and get heavy-handed. There was none of that. They were quite friendly and quite communicative. Now, yesterday I sent an email to Cressida Dick and got a response this morning from her. The commissioner's assistant, I suppose it is, and basically it was because I was asking them whether the orders were coming down from the top, whether they were happy with the way the police behaved. I wasn't accusatory. I was just asking questions. And what's interesting is that the authorities can pretty much get away with anything they like if they claim that it's for your own good. If they claim that it's for your safety, if they claim that it's for your health, if they claim that it's for your security, they can pretty much do anything. And so when a politician or a police chief or anybody else says they're doing it for your good or your health or your safety, your security, whatever, you've really got to listen carefully, because that's their entry point. And at that point, they can pretty much do anything. They come into your house, like the Coronavirus Act says, and they can take your kids away. That's what they can do. So you have to be very, very, very aware. And I think I'm kind of disappointed in people for not being quite as questioning as I think they should be.
I think people should be outraged. I'm stunned people are so sort of relaxed about the whole thing. They should be really angry.
Yeah, they're meek, aren't they? I see it around here, around Salford. And it really distresses me that I see it around Salford. I come from Ballybeg in Waterford, which was a great place to grow up, but it was a rough and tumble housing estate. Great people, but working class like us, and good people. And you don't expect those people to roll over for it. You expect them to be kind of the last line of defence, really. But they're going along with it. We've got Fred Fairbrass and Richard, his brother, the legendary Right Said Fred, live on the radio today. It's great to have them on. And the guys were at the protest on Saturday at Trafalgar Square. It was covered by every newspaper in the country, and negatively, of course, and on social media and all the rest of it. Great to have them on. Jean Ann, my oft-mentioned friend, it's a celebrity festival today. Jean Ann says, what do the lads think? Do they think that all of these rules, which seem to contradict one another, are we being deliberately kept kind of hopping from one foot to another with these daily directives? Are they deliberately confusing us?
Fred and I disagree slightly on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the confusion is intentional. But personally, and it reminds me when I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid, Idi Amin was president of Uganda, and he used to wake up in the morning and make up new rules, and then tell the police to go and punish people who weren't obeying to those rules that he hadn't made public. And that was a slightly extreme example, but it feels a bit like that. That you ask people in the street, or you speak with people we spoke to on Saturday, and people don't know. It's the chaos. I can't imagine they're this incompetent.
Oh,
right.
Maybe that's naive.
Richard disagrees though. Let Richard disagree. Could we get an argument between the Freds today? Richard, you disagree. Go on.
I kind of think it's more to do with incompetence. I think that the government panicked right at the very beginning when they saw crowded wards in northern Italy. I think Johnson is a good news guy. He likes spreading good news and isn't that great at dealing with tough stuff. I don't think he's anything like as organised as he would like us to believe. The cabinet is probably pretty chaotic, is my impression. He was chaotic as a journalist. His copy was always coming in at the last minute. I think my personal thing is I wouldn't be surprised if he gets Brexit done and then he clears off sometime in the summer next year.
That's to assume that he's making the decisions.
That's assuming he's making decisions.
And he's not being driven by Cummins.
Yeah, well, that's
just before you came on, a gentleman was on from Germany, Dr. Sucharit Bhakti, and I won't waste your time by telling you how qualified he is. He's very, very, very qualified. And he's written a book. He's not at all anti-vax, and I know you guys have got to be careful because they'll call you everything. I'm not anti-vax either, by the way. I'm pro-safe vaxes that are proven to be safe. But anyway, this guy said to me before you came on, I shouldn't call him a guy, he was a really nice guy, Dr. Sucharit Bhakti. He said, Richie, look, I think what they're trying to do is exaggerate, the threat of the disease, mess around with the case numbers because they want us to take a vaccine that we don't need. Richard, you might think that's a bit of a conspiracy theory. What do you think?
I certainly think there are people out there, and Bill Gates is obviously one, who thinks that that vaccines are a panacea of some kind.
Yeah.
The fundamental issue for me on everything, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about COVID-19, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Brexit, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about politics, it doesn't matter. No, all of it comes down to one thing, and that is it's your decision to take. That's your decision. If you want the vaccine, if you're prepared to go for an untrialed, politically rushed through vaccine, that's entirely up to you. I don't have a problem with you doing that, but just don't expect me to. So I don't believe that the vaccine is going to be the silver bullet. I think this is a tiger that's being ridden by the authorities, and I don't think they know how to get off. I think they'd love to get off. I think they really would, but I think they buried themselves at the beginning so deep. And it's also the conceit of government that believes that illness is a management issue. There was a doctor writing the paper the other week, and he made a good point. He was a retired GP, and he said that in the old days, if you like, we use that expression, back in the day, illness was just illness. That's what it was. It was a biological reality of being a biological creature. Now, because we've offset and offloaded so much of our personal care and health to the authorities, when something goes wrong, we expect them to put it right. So we have expectations from the government which they can't meet, but they haven't got the nuts
or the skills
to either do it or admit it. That's the problem. We just need to pull back and recognise that there are some things the government cannot and will never get right. And this thing with COVID-19 is it's like the war on drugs. It will never be won.
Also, the idea that they say, we'll do anything to keep you safe. We've never been safe. We're not safe now, and we won't be safe tomorrow. They don't have the skills or the capability to keep us safe.
There are sort of illusions that we live with. I mean, there was one when I think Dominic Raab said it right at the very beginning. He said, you can't put a price on a human life. Well, yes, we can.
We do it every day, don't we?
Yeah, the NICE do it all the time. Every hospital surgeon has to do it. We do it all the time. These are conceits that we live with. Like the NHS is the best in the world. Is that true?
No.
These are conceits that we live with.
It's not.
And until we face these illusions and deal with them and wake up and stop being quite so childish about it, things will never improve.
Let me remind our listeners, we've got Richard and Fred Fairbrass from Right Said Fred on the show. It really is great to meet you, Richard. Thanks for coming back, Fred. I really enjoyed when we spoke. This programme is very young when you came on, and we had a lovely chat. The guys have had an absolutely massive career, stellar career, and hopefully it'll continue. I want to ask you in a few minutes about your mum. When Fred was on, he was talking about your mum, and I know your mum passed away. She had Alzheimer's, God love her, and it's important because I know you were getting into some interesting conversations on Twitter about protecting senior citizens and people with comorbidities, and I want to talk about that if you don't mind in a few minutes. Sure. But let's talk about the damage that the shutdown or lockdown is doing to the entertainment industry, to the arts. Both of you can take over here. I felt so sorry in the last couple of days for promoters and for Noddy Holder was on Sky News this morning. I mean, there were DJs on, and they weren't being selfish. They were talking about everybody else at every level, security, the road crew, everything. Tell us, guys, what's it doing to the industry?
Well, the ripple effect is just ginormous. When people go and see a show, understandably, they see the band or the comedian or the DJ, whatever, and they don't think about all the connectivity that is required to make that happen. And, you know, as you say, the caterers, security, the road crew, the riggers, the drivers, the sparks, the chippies, all that, it is just colossal, the amount of people it takes to put on a festival. Plus, it takes a lot of balls and passion to put on a festival. Yeah. Whatever you think of some of the people that
the do
festivals, they at some point they've had the nuts to say, I'm going to make this work, and that's a pretty impressive thing. But what it's doing to the industry, I mean, we're all our shows were cancelled, and at the moment everything's moved to next year, and we are contracted for those shows. But I am expecting promoters to come back and renegotiate fees already agreed. Yeah. And then I think also some shows won't happen next year. Most of our work's in Europe and other places apart from the UK, so that might benefit us, because I think the UK is going to be really struggling next year for shows. And I think what's very sad is just people, we're lucky, we write what we do, so we do have we have a royalty stream. But if you're a session musician, if you're a sound engineer, a lighting engineer, just a really good road crew guy, trying to take that skill into another area of entertainment, into another area that's non-entertainment, is really difficult. And there's an agent we were talking to who's trying to put a festival on next year, and he's already struggling to find electricians and chippies and riggers, because they've had to go and get work elsewhere. And that's, I think it's the long-term damage that's doing to the theatres is a really good example. 60% of theatres make 70% of their revenue every Christmas. Wow. That's how that works.
That's amazing. Jean Ann just piped in there. Jean Ann, the actress who's been on every stage on these islands, has just said that Christmas, it's going to be devastating for the theatres.
It is. The property developers are sharpening their knives already. They'll go in and do horrible deals where theatres are struggling. If they've got a wealthy patron, they might survive, but many of them haven't. And I think it's going to be carnage. And I think it's criminal what the government are allowing to do, allowing this to happen. And you could argue, I come from a more conspiratorial end of the debate than my brother, but you could argue that if you want to weaken a country, if you want to make them more servile, easier to manipulate, easier to install with fear, then you take away their leisure time. That's part of the deconstruct that you could argue. If you want to make people, want to take away their spirit and their enjoyment. And in many cases, of course, their jobs, the way the economy is going, then the leisure industry is your first port of call. And I don't mean Right Said Fred. I mean theatres and opera and ballet and DJs and stand-up comics and all the people that would not normally be now in Las Vegas or Reno or in Blackpool or wherever. All those people and the satellite people that work with them are all out of work. And I think it's a national disgrace. I do.
Well, we did a TV show the other day with Mike Stock, in fact, and Mike Reed, and what they've done, it's a new kind of model, and I take my hat off to them for doing this. What they did is they've set up their own sort of studio, if you like, in a building which they rented, and it's properly done. It's all with a stage, and it's got the dollies and the crane and all the cameras and the sound system, everything else. And it was just like a German TV show, just as professional. The idea is they're going to put it on the internet. You'll pay money. Lots of bands on it. We were one of the many bands that were doing it. Lots of bands doing it. You pay £5 or whatever it is to watch it on the internet. And then once the money comes in, the costs are covered, and what's left goes to the bands. Now that's a positive step. I think whilst we can all complain, and we were talking to our old agent the other day, and he reckons about 80% of small venues will just go to the wall.
80%.
80% of small venues will go to the wall.
Yeah.
Now, we tend to look back in this country to the 60s and the swinging London and the Carnaby Street and the Beatles. That only happened because at the grassroots level, there was the ability for artists to get up and do stuff. That has to happen. If we are interested in pop culture in this country, and when I say pop culture, I don't mean pop music, I mean popular culture, fashion, pop music, any group entertainment, comedy, whatever it happens to be, you have to provide the facilities for people to get up, bands to get up, artists to get up and do their thing. Because otherwise, this country's responsible for some fantastic acts. You think of the acts that this country's produced over the last 30 or 40 years. It's extraordinary from such a small island. And we should never, ever, ever stop thinking that that's not worth trying to get back. However we do it. And the guys, Mike Stock and Mike Reid, in all fairness to them, they put their money where their mouth is, and that is a start. That's the kind of thing that I think will have to be considered in the future.
In the near future. Richard and Fred Fairbrass are live with us. Right said Fred, they need very little introduction. It's exactly 19 minutes to the top of the air. We've probably got the guys for another 10, 12 minutes. Twitter has gone mental, understandably. Alan, whom is a bass player and is a session musician and is a roadie. Delighted to hear you talking about, everybody else in the industry. He was also driving when Fred said that he'd like to beat up Matt Hancock using Priti Patel, and he's lucky he's still alive because he was at the wheel when you said that. Thanks to Alan. Thanks to everybody else. Before we talk about, this is really important about, do we protect the vulnerable? Does everybody have to shield to protect the vulnerable? It's very interesting because I saw you discussing this, Fred or Richard or both of you on Twitter. Before we get into that, we do live in this terribly awful post-fact, post-truth world where people can say anything about anybody. I was stunned to see Richard Fairbrass being called a Nazi on Twitter the other day, and a hard right or far right guy. This is a man who nearly got his head kicked in for standing up for LGBT rights. Yeah. I mean, Jesus wept like. What happened to the truth? That's true, by the way, Richard, right?
Yeah, it's true. I have tried to grow a little moustache, but it just doesn't work.
I mean, it's far right said Fred, Reich said Fred. Jesus. It's all that stuff.
You have to laugh.
And people think they're being really imaginative, but
I'm too sexy for my mask.
Oh yes, that's clever stuff.
Clever stuff.
And deeply drippy, deeply shitty. I mean, come. And I said,
don't talk, just piss off.
Yeah, and I said on Twitter, this is the best you've got. You've got to get creative. And they didn't. They just came back and they called us baldy twats. And
one of the things I think is really sad about that is that. You have to laugh at it because it's stupid, but fundamentally what it means is if you go to a march and you stand next to somebody they've got a big poster which says the Queen Mother eats, or the Queen eats babies. Yeah. The assumption is that you agree with that poster.
Madness.
We've got into that place where if you just walk into the same room as these people, you are automatically the same as them. And the ability of so many people not to nuance what's going on in front of them, just because somebody is standing next to, I can't remember, there's a famous politician who's standing next to somebody horrible. And it was the boxer. What's his name? Frank Bruno was seen shaking hands with Jimmy Savile and somebody else. And suddenly Frank Bruno's in trouble. Well, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So I just wish people would take a little bit more time to think.
Yeah, he didn't know anything about what Jimmy Savile was doing. And I'll tell you something else. You probably will get hammered for appearing here because I've obviously had some very interesting characters on this program. Now, I would disagree with them, I would argue with them, but you're right, Richard, that's a very important point. It's no longer good enough, and this is a very dangerous, very scary place where somebody can say, you should stay away from a certain radio show, not because the presenter is a bigoted arsehole, but because maybe he's interviewed a bigoted arsehole. That's dangerous. Now, let's get to this before we run out of time. This is really important. Yeah. And thanks for coming on today again. Lovely to have both of you. I know you've plenty to do. I know despite the lockdown and the slowdown in live gigs, I know you've got plenty to do at the moment. So great to have you on. Listeners, delighted you're on. Now, if and God rest your mum, by the way, Fred spoke very eloquently about her when I first met Fred. And she's obviously a very special lady. Both of you loved her. If your mum was still with us, how do you think you might feel about the idea? Might you have a different approach to lockdown? Because your mum had Alzheimer's, and she probably undoubtedly would have been vulnerable to a virus that was going around, a particularly nasty one. Do you think if she was still with us, both of you might have taken a different approach to the lockdown?
No, because we take the approach that we took when Mum was in care in Brighton about a year before she died. There was a really bad virus in the home had got somehow, and people were becoming very, very ill, and the home was concerned they would start losing some of the patients. And obviously what we did is we stayed away because that was the best thing for the home and for Mum. And if it was now, it makes total sense. I'm not anti-lockdown. I'm anti-locking down a healthy workforce. I think that's ridiculous. I think you've got to protect the frail, protect the vulnerable, protect the elderly. I think that all makes complete sense. But the thing with, if Mum was around now, it would be heartbreaking to see the way her and her generation are being treated, not having family to visit. And even if it's, even if it's in a way that maybe you can't actually physically touch for whatever reason, but how much damage is that doing? Yeah, I mean,
one of the weird things with Alzheimer's, of course, is that once you're complete, as one specialist said at the time, once you're completely in it, you're actually happier than you are when you're transitioning into it from being able-bodied. So for Mum, let's supposing Mum was alive now, if she was still at home pre-Alzheimer's, this would be an extremely awful time because we would have to say hello to her through the glass, through the window. The reality is that once she was in the home and she became fully consumed by Alzheimer's, she wouldn't have known if we weren't there from 1 month to the next.
No, she wouldn't have remembered if we hadn't been there the following day or had.
Exactly. So in an odd way, for people without relatives who are affected by dementia, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to judge other people, but it seems to me that it might be easier on the patient, particularly the sufferer, than it would be that if they were able-bodied and fully cognizant and having to wave at their relatives through a glass window. I think that would be even more upsetting and more for both parties, actually. Yeah, for both parties.
There's a local care home Richard helps out at, and we're friends with, and they've got dementia patients, and for the flu jab, they've got to remove all the dementia patients into a coach and drive them about 2 miles up the road to get jabbed. With dementia patients, you can't. We know from Mum, even if she goes into a room that she didn't understand, it would freak her out. Yeah. The idea of leaving a facility, getting in a moving vehicle, because Mum didn't. When Mum became very ill, she didn't understand how she almost couldn't understand if the car was moving or if the world was moving. Do you know what I mean? It's that complete disconnect. And I just think what these people have to go through, just the callousness of making these people leave the comfort of their home when they're so fragile to go and get a jab.
Well, two things. The lady that runs the home got a missive from the government or the local council a few days ago advising that all residents should wear a mask. This is where they live, bear in mind. This is where these people live. And
the senior citizens, Richard. They want the senior citizens to wear a mask.
All expected to wear a mask in their own, basically what is their own home. And with regards to the jab not being able to be delivered to the residents within the home, the reason for that is because the people doing it are not insured. Yep. That's it. My God. I mean, the way we treat, I hate to say, I don't want to sort of, presume that we know what's going on in the upper levels of government, but I do have a suspicion that once you stop paying tax and you're just consuming rather than producing, you are of no interest. Yeah.
Useless eater.
Exactly.
Useless eater.
A Bilderberg expression, I think it is, yeah.
So I do think that, so when the care homes, where people were put into care homes from hospitals with COVID and they've tested positive for COVID-19, I don't think that was necessarily because the government was malevolent. I just think they didn't care. It wasn't on their radar. No, care homes. What are they? I don't think
that's a fair point, Richard. And either way, it's a very fair point. And if you were right, it's just as bad anyway, isn't it?
It is.
It's horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, the effect is just the same. I think what I've never understood about the way people view the elderly is that if you imagine life as like one long train, a newborn baby is right at the back on the same train, going exactly the same direction, but the newborn baby is on the far carriage, right at the very back. The very old people are right at the front. but we're all going in the same direction. So why do we imagine that they're different from us? They're just us.
Older.
But older.
But older.
Yeah. That's it.
There was a lovely...
The idea that they're somehow a different species is so ridiculous. I don't understand it.
There was a lovely lady called Edna who phoned Ian Collins on Talk Radio today, and she's in her 80s, and said that she just can't understand it. It's absolutely... It's maddening to her, this idea that she needs to be protected and that everybody else must give up their lives. She couldn't understand it and says it's totally wrong. And most senior people that I either meet myself or that I see on television or radio, they seem to be speaking with one voice. They say this is terribly wrong. We'll take our chances, or we'll dose up on D3, we'll dose up on vitamin C, we'll take some zinc, and that's what we do during flu season. So it's crazy.
Exactly. Also, one of the things about one of the biggest crimes, I think, of this government is to not be clear about the information that I'm sure they have. They're not clear on masks. If masks were standardised, we'd understand it, but they're not standardised. And now on public transport, it's just a face covering, which could be just pulling your T-shirt up over your face.
Yeah.
They're not clear about whether you have to wear a mask in the open air, so they just let people get on with it. I think the lack of information is intentional. I think they are intending to let people make it up as they go along.
Hey, Richard, thanks. Thanks for saying that. They're both of it. Thanks, Fred, for saying that. I know Richard disagrees about the intentional misinformation. I just don't want to lose the last 5 minutes. I've got an important question I do want to ask you. Thanks for, first of all, kudos to you, Richard, for working and helping out in a care home. That's an amazing thing, mate. Well done. And thanks for telling us about them masking up the residents. I didn't know that was going on, and we need to know that. So thanks for bringing that up. That will have come as a shock to a lot of...
Just very quickly, Richard.
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
That care home has had no cases and no deaths.
And they're putting masks on the seniors.
Yeah, they're absolutely, they've done a brilliant job and kept everybody happy, and now they want to mask them when they've been so successful.
And this is not the care home employees. They don't want to do this. This has been mandated by the local authority.
For the residents. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, final question was for you. Yeah. I love my live music. I love it. You guys have always done Manchester Pride. I've never been. To be fair, Rich, you were going to look after me Fred, you were going to look after me 1 year, and we couldn't do it because I was out of town. So you were going to look after me. I've not had the pleasure of seeing you guys live. Is there a possibility, do you think, in the near future, that I'll be able to go and see the Freds, and I'll be able to do that unharassed by the government telling me that I have to have a passport or this or that or the other thing, or would I have to resign myself in future to be watching the Freds live on a video link? How do you think it'll be?
I think shows will be very, very conditional. A lady on Facebook today, I don't know them, I just saw the post, and they said they were stopped from going into a bar yesterday or pub because they didn't have the track and trace app. Now, I think that is just the beginning.
Shocking.
Yeah, it is shocking. It's disgusting, and I think data integration is going to come. So your bank will have your health records, NHS or whoever will have your bank records, and they'll have all your data details, your behavioural data, and all this will be integrated. And you'll go to do something, and they'll say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Farrell, I can't do that because you don't meet the criteria." You may never find out what the criteria is.
Well, it's a little bit.
And so I think, going back to your question, I think Europe's going to be ahead of the curve compared to the UK, but I think it's going to be very conditional, certainly for next year. I think anything resembling normality, if we ever get back to there, in terms of shows, won't happen until 2022.
Wow. Yeah. Richard, you have the final word, Richard. Go on, because I know you were trying to get in there, and then we'll wrap it up. Final word to you.
Well, I think Fred is absolutely right. I think it's going to be very, very conditional. I personally think that if artists like us, we can moan all the time and say, "Oh, this is terrible," and it is terrible. It's really, really awful. But I think artists have got to find a new way of working in anticipation of the fact that things are not going to get better anytime soon. There's a company in the town where I live, and they are already doing safe to fly certificates for your passport at a cost of £87. And that's, if we're not careful, that's where it's going to go. And so we need to be very, very. We have to have our eyes open when it comes to connectivity. We need to be really, really, really tough. And that sounds ridiculous on liberty and on privacy and on freedoms that were hard won. And I think, going back to the musicians thing, musicians we've got to think outside the box. We absolutely have to. So do promoters, and so do everybody has to. Everybody absolutely has to, because the industry is getting absolutely whacked by this government.
Lads, thanks for your time today. You'll never know how much it meant to me. Great to have you on. Thanks for giving us the 45 minutes we've had chatting about these issues. I don't have to tell our listeners where they can find Right Said Fred. They know it's at the Freds on Twitter. Follow at the Freds on Twitter. And anytime you feel like it in the future, come back on for a bit of a rant. I'd love to have you on.
Cheers, we will hold you to that. Yep.
Thanks very much, Fred, and you, Richard. Lovely to speak to you today. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, mate.
Brilliant. The legendary Right Said Fred on the Richie Allen Radio Show Tuesday, the 29th of September. Terrific stuff as well. Well, what do you think of that? A care home where nobody has died of COVID or been sick. The local authority mandated that the residents wear masks indoors. I mean, this is shocking stuff, isn't it? We'll get into more of that, I think, in the next day or two. We'll look into that and get into it.